Hey, and welcome to another podcast of Ask
Mom
and Dad. Well, this time I got it right. It wasn't like last time where I got it confused and I started. It seems like so we have to start every podcast like we do, talking about how poorly we start podcasts. This episode is brought to you by nothing in particular of worth. Popcorn. Okay, today's episode is brought to you by popcorn because all those kernels stuck in your teeth are what everyone longs for after a long movie. Nobody likes it when halfway through the movie you have popcorn stuck in your teeth. Now you too can have popcorn that still gets stuck in your teeth. Welcome, popcorn.
Yeah, the point is you don't even go to the movies except for popcorn, so they're kind of the show stopper. They're the whole reason.
The show popper.
Okay. Anyway,
see what I did there? Show popper
behind your head. It says hot, fresh popcorn. Just made me drool just a little bit.
So now we know where your head's going to be the whole time we're sitting here talking about things.
Nah, I'm fine.
Yeah, well, popcorn. The problem with popcorn is it never quite gets to the end of the movie. Have you ever noticed that the popcorn never quite gets to the end?
If you keep adding butter, it will, because it kind of just fills up your. I don't know.
But your hands are so soft and supple afterwards. After all that butter works its way into the hands. Well, speaking of never quite getting to the end of something, last week we didn't quite get to the end of our subject, so we're going to pick up where we left off last week. We were talking about what it means to, what do we do next? Graduation, kind of now what? And it's graduation season still. And the cool thing about graduation season, if you talk about it 1 week, there's still time because right now, as of schools are still getting out and kids. I mean, maybe a lot of the ceremonies are over as of this recording, but there's still people sitting at home going, "What am I going to do with my life?" And that's a challenge. It's a big deal.
I think you and I still say that, don't we? Just about every other day.
Let me just encourage anyone graduating from school right now. That's a question you'll be doing pretty regularly. It goes from what am I going to do with my life to what am I doing with my life,
right?
To what did I do with my life, and oh no, what here? Now? Yeah. So really, it's that's the cycle. You come all the way back around from oh no, what now to what am I going to do with my life so right now we're back at oh no, what now? That for the record, for you guys that are out there. That happens when your last child moves out. You go, oh no, what now? And then you find out real quick that you continue to parent for quite some time.
Right. Well, and that was something that we thought about talking about, is how do you parent kids going through these transitions? And likely you will at least interact with them, if not them coming to you saying, what do I do? Whatever. But one of the things that went through my mind was legitimately there's so many ideas of what they think it's supposed to look like. And what you just said was about how, like as soon as school's over, well, they've either got to have already made plans to go on to school, I mean, most of them, or land a job or do all these different things. And I just thought, very few of them think long term. What is, and I think that's because they talk about how you're invincible when you're 20-something,
Right.
You can go skiing or whatever and take your life into your hands. I think of skiing because it scares me. But, racing, whatever these things
for the kids that are less prepared, that their parents just said, go out there and run into walls and see what comes of it.
Well, I just think they don't think very far into the future for the most part, which is okay and good to some degree. On the other hand, you can mess your life up really bad if you don't think a little bit about the future before you start making stupid decisions or decisions at all or whatever. It occurred to me, the one advice I think I would give to graduating kids who literally are leaving home or are deciding, to have their own, even their first apartment. I mean, the challenge is to get out of the parents' house. I want so badly to get out from under my roof, my mom and dad's roof, have my own rules, set my own times, have my own schedule, that kind of thing. But there's so many things to think about in doing that, and it is freeing. I remember loving my first apartment, well, even dorm life for that matter. Not necessarily I didn't really necessarily want to leave my mom and dad that bad. That was not a draw for me. But to go out and experience my own things, to have some of the goals that I had in my heart and head, starting to live some of those. I mean, I really just literally wanted to do some mission work. I wanted to do some revival teams and stuff like that. I couldn't really do it in a small town, so some of that was available when I went to school. We talked about a little bit of that, and the world was opened up for that. But I loved living on my own. We had a son like that, didn't we?
Yes.
15 was the only one of all of our kids, our youngest one, that decided he'd be okay with living on his own.
Yeah. He said the only reason he still lived at home was because legally he didn't think he could move out.
And at that point, he didn't have an income, so he couldn't support
That was the other
either.
thing. I think he gave that was another rule, but that wasn't the first rule. The first rule was I think I'm just stuck here, which I didn't find very, very comforting. It made me feel kind of as a failure as a parent.
Did find that flattering?
But then again, I was also the father who kept going, I'm just coming by to make sure you're still breathing.
He had started learning most of our kids had to learn how to do their own laundry pretty early. And then he had learned how to cook his own meals, at least, ramen noodles and hamburger helper. He had expanded into his own spaghetti and had a recipe even for his spaghetti sauce.
Pasta options.
And pizza sauce. He could make his own pita pizzas. I mean, it's pretty.
Yeah, he's got
a
terrible diet, but he's doing. I mean,
that's
I think
not
he
that
feeds
bad.
his
Throws a
dog
little
better
broccoli here or there, or green bean. He's fine. And he uses ground turkey, so that's really good. Anyway, all that to say, he was actually adventurous about that, but same as me. Not necessarily because he just wanted to leave, just because he thought he'd kind of enjoy living by himself. He had his dog. He wasn't lonely. Some of that's motivating, I guess.
Well, let's talk about. So the couple things last time, I don't know that I remember speaking, because we talked about there's things we could discuss, like as a parent, what do you do? But the other things, what you just said was the options getting out. So go to college. We got immersed in our own college story last time a lot, and it was fun to talk about that stuff. But that's our experience. But in our own kids' lives, we've had the experience of some have gone to school, some have gone into the military. Some have just gone into life, gotten married. Most our daughters mostly,
most of them, actually.
and then we've got one that went to college. Out of 8, one's in college. Many of them touched college and then kind of rolled off into something else, like the military or just got married or whatever. And then our youngest, who's doing life and not sure that he wants to go to college. He may trade school into.
Well, he almost finished an associate's degree though already, so that is helpful because whatever.
But that was largely because while he was under our charge, we pushed him into.
Well, it was high school equivalent. I mean, he was doing it at the same time as high school, so it worked out pretty helpful for us to feel like we had gotten him started on it. But yeah, I don't even know if he. I meant to talk to him about that, whether he actually applied to get the associate's degree, like declared, but yeah, because we're hearing so much these days about how people are really even advised not to go, especially in the conservative realms, not to go too much to liberal arts colleges because they're teaching too much yuck stuff these days. That doesn't really, we talked about this a little bit too, it doesn't really translate into a job, or it doesn't give them a skill. It gives them some sort of psychobabble, way to think, but that's not even, most of them doesn't line with scripture or anything. So if they're wanting to follow God's will in their lives, those aren't going to be parts of their.
No, so as a parent, trying to advise a child, I mean, like, I think where we got hung is last year we talked about how our parents both were college minded. You need to go to college. And well,
okay. Yes, yours were, I think, at least that was how they advised. You probably could have gone to military and they'd probably been fine with that, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was more than my mom. I had actually just asked her, how will I get permission to get married? And she said, well, I'd rather you have some sort of training, skilled training, or a year or 2 of college. Now, my mother did not go to regular college. She did get a cosmetology training eventually. But she had gone immediately after high school and gone to St. Louis and worked in a good bank up there and really had a decent job before she was even 16 or 17. But, and then my dad went to a couple of years of college, but he went on into the Navy, and that was more where his experience came in, and he's used some of his college as well as his experience. But so they weren't big pushing me to go to college. I'm the one that when I experienced that, I explained last time about Super Summer and experienced the atmosphere of a Christian school or a Baptist school actually had things that I wanted to be associated with and encounter, like the contemporary music I was loving and couldn't get a hold of where I was, and the atmosphere of other Christians who are called to ministerial types callings. I didn't mention this last time, but I was wanted to do mission work, and there was actually a missions degree you could get. But I didn't know it until the second year, and it was a literal almost 5-year degree to start with. But you had to start out. So I don't know what all I missed, but when I asked about it, that's what they told me. So I didn't go toward that. But anyway, yeah, that wasn't necessarily required in my home. But we were definitely of the era. What? That was encouraged.
Yeah, it was encouraged. I guess so as parents, if you're an adult who has kids that are getting ready to go to college, we've met many people around us recently who are just all tied up in the graduation thing. And I'm not referring to kindergarten graduation, which we have experienced. I just can't get past the kindergarten. It's like, dun, 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 dun. Kindergartner can barely walk in a straight line, much less process down a thing. And so that's probably more comedy than anything else, but just some parents that are, gosh, there was a preschool graduation.
Little things along the way that give them courage to do other things. I don't know. That would be the philosophy.
Yeah. Like, what are we going to do? Let's go party now. No, that's not. Anyway, so what if your child, so as a parent whose child's making choices, how do you and how do we, I reflect on ours, help our children make decisions, or better yet, be involved in the decision-making process, but also not be overly intrusive? In other words, you've got a child, what are we trying to do? Parents, just in case you haven't heard this, I think a better way to say this, we're not trying to raise children, we're raising adults.
Right.
In other words, we have children, and our goal is to help them become adults. And if people are like, don't take their childhood, my entire job is to take their childhood away from them, from the moment they're born.
To steal the foolishness, right?
It's my job is to tame the foolishness out of this child, is to train them in direction. Well, does that mean they're not going to have fun? No, that doesn't mean they're not going to have fun. Adult men do stupid things all the time in the name of fun. But nonetheless, so the question that I guess to kind of jump on there is, how can we help people become? How do we help young people? What is the word I'm like? How did I put the question? How do we help young people, our children, be decision makers without getting into their way? How do we? What does it mean to let them make decisions? And how do we support them in that without being, well, I'm a lawyer because I didn't have a choice. My mom and dad said I was supposed to be a lawyer. And I'd say, you're darn right, because we need someone to take care of us when we get old. Anyway, so how do we help them?
Well, first of all, there is exactly where you start. What about your own self, your own fears, your own living vicariously? You have to put that in check first, I think. And that's the difference.
They can't all be rock
in
stars.
Our home, it was completely different. On the one hand, we wouldn't have expected anything from them to emulate us, except that we would, I guess, because being in the ministry as we were, you're not going to push your kids, or at least from our perspective, you're going to push kids into ministry. That's God's job. He's the only one that can really call them, because if he doesn't, there's no use. They cannot. This calling it's only him that can keep you strong and motivated, whatever the words are, strong enough to trust in him, because it's a job that makes no money but has all the stress, that kind of thing. So it's not something we're going to say, oh, you should be a preacher, you should be a ministry, whatever. But however, on the other side of that, only God can secure their future at all, and we know this. So the only fear for them, for me, and I said this Wednesday, my birthday was Wednesday, and Micaiah called me, and she's the only one that I think actually at least called me early. Josiah tried to call me from the ship later, or he did for a second or two, not from the ship actually. He was from Oslo, Norway. Yeah. But she didn't realize, I was sitting there with a group of ladies who had come to celebrate my birthday with me, and she didn't realize, because I told her, say hi to my friends and I'll let you go, and she said, yeah, I can call you back later. Maybe I needed to have a quiet time while Walker's sleeping anyway, so. And before she started teaching music things, I think. She didn't realize the gift that gave to me. Because for us, for our children, it was to set our kids up to rely on Jesus, to trust him, to literally see him as everything they need and everything that is given, that he's given them everything they need for life and godliness. And those are the goals. I don't care, you may want your child to be set up for life, monetarily, or, great houses, great whatevers. But how is that ever really going to take care of them if they have life, and godliness? They're set. It's all they need, and eternal life even further than that. So that gift she gave me was to know that she'd rather, Mom, I just called to say happy birthday to you, but I want to go spend time with Jesus.
So when it comes to the question, how do we influence without being intrusive?
Okay, there's the better word, right?
Yeah,
maybe
influence rather than be intrusive. What you saw in her conversation to you was a result of influence of our lives lived before them. To some degree, how do you help your kids with the question? Yeah. How do you help your kids with support their career choices or whatever without being overly intrusive? If you're at this point and you haven't done that already,
exactly.
then you
may have a hard time.
Yeah, you have. If you don't have the credibility in your child's life to speak to those things, then you can't. There is no answer to that question.
It really does begin when you set them on a path early.
Yeah, you have to parent all along,
right?
Because once you get to graduation, you're cutting strings to some degree. I mean, one of those stories that I like about a wedding is when a mother mailed her son apron strings when he got married to send a message that you're now with her.
It's yours.
It's yours now, and to a degree, that's what's happening a little bit at graduation. When a child is deciding to go into the workforce or college or wherever they're going.
Well, and my thoughts are, like you just said, if you haven't set them up early, to go to the scripture for their answers, to have those as the bedrocks of their foundation that answers the fear, the uncertainty, the question marks that are for everybody's tomorrows, doesn't matter what it involves, right? If you haven't steered them, and I would go again, like my mother would take me to Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 that says, don't lean your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Because that is the opposite of wickedness and foolishness, is to trust him and acknowledge him. And that's what the Bible warns against. And that's where if you read the Bible, it warns you about where these, places of where your foot's going to slip,
right?
Where you're going to be tempted, and it's all going the opposite direction. If they're going toward him and you've set that up early, then you'll be able to influence that even as they're leaving your home, I think. It occurred to me that my advice to anyone graduating, beginning, like I was saying a minute ago, getting their own apartment, whatever, they need to think of the future. They need to think similarly to what we're saying about their own children. They're not going to have children yet. You may not even be married yet. But start to think about what you want your home to look like. My mom was encouraging and listened to a sermon, and I think I mentioned this last time. You want to have if you trust in Jesus yourself, and that is who all life is about, then you want to have a Jesus house. The description of that is you want to have scripture on your wall. You want to have biblical things for people to have access to. You want anyone walking into your home to get that idea from you. Because as you set that up, even as a single person, as you set up what you want to portray to the world as important, then that's also what's going to happen when you get married, when you pick a spouse, even when you go toward a spouse, when you go toward having your own home with a partner like that, because it's a partnership for life. And then when your children start coming into your home, because at the very beginning, you establish what the priorities of your life are going to be. And leaving your own home, you got to start figuring that out for yourself. Your parents tried to do that in your own home, but
well, in full disclosure, I can't say that I was that thought out. I married a good-looking woman, and I liked that part about it. And I knew I was going to I knew I was going to pursue ministry. I'd settled that much, and
well, to some degry, that's where you started, right?
Yeah, it's not like I've got, and just to be clear, it's not like I've got this, okay, here's my checklist. I mean, you had more checklist going on than I did.
Well, I don't know that any of us do, and I think that's why I'm saying it's good if you can start thinking that way.
There are people that do. I'm just letting you know that I'm not. I mean, I've met some very driven college-age kids that are going through, and I'm going to do this and this and this and this and this. So I'm going, and you're going to be so disappointed here and here and here and here, because there's so much disappointment that comes with if you're too rigid.
Absolutely.
And both a beautiful as well as an ugly thing about being young and ignorant, unaware of life and what it's going to throw at you is that the beautiful thing is that you have
you are unaware,
undamaged, well, you have undamaged vision.
Yeah.
You can see your dreams. That's all you have out there is dreams. And there's nothing that's standing in the way. That's why everyone in their 20s thinks that they can be the next greatest rock star, just to use that, because and their parents are going, I understand now what my mother meant when she said, you need to find something to fall back on. And that made no sense to me at that age. But she said that about the ministry. And I'm going, the ministry is the thing to fall back on.
Yeah, that's the sad part, because I don't think she thought that about music.
No, she probably thought I had a better shot at music.
I would say that about music.
Yeah.
Or at least a professional music.
Well, but then the other side of that, though, is your 20s especially is a great time, because you are more, it's like a child that is learning to walk. You have a lot more resiliency in your younger years than you do as you get older. So there's a period of time and that you can be constantly and you need adults in your life. And this comes to my initial question. You have adults in your life that believe in you, that speak into your life, so that when you falter, when you fail, your dreams aren't realized as fast as you want to. Because also when you're young in your 20s, nothing happens fast enough. Craig Campbell said to me one time about Nashville being a 7-year town, and meaning that if you come here as an artist and you want to perform, then it's going to be 7 years before you really start to get any serious traction or possibly break into the industry.
Sounds like similar to what we saw on that Michael J. Fox documentary we watched about his life. Same thing. He had to give it several years before he even broke into anything. Was literally, he said he was putting nickels and dimes together and stealing the jam from KFC to eat because he didn't have anything to eat because he was so low on money. Yeah, you have to see that the long term is what. But I think that's kind of what I'm saying too. Almost anything that's of value is going to take a little bit of time. But what I was saying is, and I'm from a girl's perspective, I'm even thinking of the decorations in your home or the people you're inviting into your home or the atmosphere of, women a lot of times think of even like nutrition or exercise or things like that. But if you set up some of those as legitimate priorities of your life, it's going to last throughout your life. Those specific things. When you go to college, you set a precedent. You know this by experience on whether or not it's important to go to class or to, party a little, or if it's important for you to, for me, there was legitimately, here's the teller of me. So I did decent in my classes, but I remember a couple different times that I chose the whole weekend was a revival team, and I would go off and spend the whole weekend doing, music and stuff that I knew for the rest of my life was what I wanted to do. I didn't realize how all it would play out, but I knew I wanted to lead worship. So I would go on these revival teams, come back and have a huge paper due on Monday or whatever. And I had a really difficult English professor, and he would, and in that class, it was worth double. It was it was called an honors comp class. So it was a 3-hour class for the actual seat time, but it was a 6-hour that, went on your GPA. So it was heavy, but I just knew that God would take care of it because whether or not I got time to sit down and do much with that. And legitimately, I would go to that stupid 7:30 class in the morning and, try to keep my toothpicks in my eyes, literally trying not to fall asleep, but I always probably did. But, and I remember some A's that I'm like, I don't have a clue how in the world I made this. How this paper came together, how it's even here to hand it to. It was miracles to me. And you're coming back to that. But I believed that was what God wanted me to do. So the priority was that. Yeah.
And as a student, you had that foundation in Christ that helped you to endure.
Well, it was a calling. It was literally that calling was bigger to me than what I was trying to learn in school.
Right. But I'm saying there's no Christian, called to ministry or not, doesn't have a calling.
Right.
When they're wherever they are in their journey. So, and we understand, you and I, and teach that no matter what job you do, whether you're, in audio stuff or whether you're in the industry as a, whatever oil business or whatever, that's all secondary job. That's the job you do to pay for the ability for you to be a witness for Christ in the world. It's your avocation. It's not your vocation. Your vocation, according to Jesus, is go therefore into all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Spirit, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, and leading them to obey everything I've commanded you. That's what Jesus gave us to do. So that's our purpose, our focus of life. Yeah. Everything else is just, what we do to pay for that.
That's right.
And so as a missionary, you and I were unique in that we both were called to our vocation, and our avocation were the same. We were called to do what we were
at early ages, we knew that, or at least I did, I wanted what I wanted my entire life to be. Now, I'm different than, and we said that a little bit last time, different than a man. I didn't have to think about supporting a family, even though obviously I needed to eat, but it was easier for me to trust God for my pittance to eat, or, to have a roof over my head, than it might be for a man who's looking for an income that needs to support a family. But I do believe it's the same. And I hope that's true for the way we've raised our kids, our sons even, that they would see that God is their resource, no matter what their job is, that the money that comes in to support their home comes directly from Him. I don't care what it has to go through to get there. So that means that no matter what, they'll be provided for when they're trusting Him. Do you think, I know as a young man, it may be easier for you because you were going in the ministry. It's an obvious, this money's come from God, and wherever it comes from, will be supported. But you painted for a while in seminary to get us through there, and you did a couple different jobs at one point or another.
Okay, but none of those things would be real if I didn't have someone tell me, teach me, train me. So to go to to roll back to the question, how do we be an influence? We want to support their faith. As our experience was, we understood who we wanted to be. Our parents, by what we just confessed, were varying degrees of supportive of us without interfering. I would run to say that my parents had times tried to interfere with what I was trying to accomplish in life. They overstepped at least one time for sure, especially when it came around to you and I trying to get married.
Well, into your mission calling.
Into my mission calling. I mean, I was forbidden to go into a foreign mission field because they were afraid it was in a war-torn country, which it wasn't. But it was just, they didn't want me to go. But I was 16. They had the right to do that at that point. But later on in life, had I tried to do that, that was also a fear.
Yeah, exactly. There. That's what it comes back to, the parents themselves. If we're talking to parents, you've got to check your own fear. You cannot put your fear onto a child. I mean, there's many who choose military. That's what I'm saying.
So you influence, right? That's exactly what we had kids go in the military. Both of them are deployed right now, and so doing God knows what. Yeah,
right. Only
God knows what.
Right.
And so that we as parents encourage them in that. By right now, we can't. The only influence we can do is pray. But we have other kids that are chosen.
And legitimately, if you've trained them up to know Jesus and led them to Him, and there are some who reject, there are some who, turn away, but we can send our boys off knowing that they know Him. So if God was to call them home because of the military, because of something they've given their life to do, there's nothing we can do about that, but we've set a foundation of we can be secure. We don't have to be afraid because they're in God's hands.
Right, and I was going to say, given from what you've already been saying, and what we've been saying in the long form and put it in short form, is one of the first things you can do for your kids is remind them of Jesus. Give them to Jesus. That's even better. That's the first and second thing. Give them to Jesus and remind them of Jesus. You've given them to Jesus because they are, you have raised them in His care. He literally, parents, if you don't understand this, your children are a trust. They're not your property. You were given those lives were given to you. Our culture, because we now can create, we almost can create life. It seems like we can't, but we think we can. Our culture and science and all that stuff, we can have babies from frozen embryos and stuff like that. We think we have the power. No, we don't.
That's right.
And so life is a gift. All life comes from God. Right. So understand it's a gift, and so give that back. You're right. The first thing you do is, as a parent, the best way for you to influence your child is to realize your child is now an adult who you've raised and have given to God, and to have a posture say, how can I remind them of that, remind them of Jesus, and then speak into their lives, stop them, keep them from stepping onto what's the word I'm looking for? Stepping onto their dreams. You know, how do you help a child step onto their dreams? I think that, you know, like we got
pray
one
with them.
We've
too,
got
'cause
one
as
kid
you're
that's
giving
doing the most irrational thing on planet Earth right now. He's going to college to be an actor.
Yeah.
And
Which we laugh about most frequently.
yeah,
No,
well,
I'm just-
and he cries about a lot because he's like, what am I going to do with my life? And he's got a skill set, and drama makes sense because he's one of our most dramatic kids. And I'm not saying anything out of school that he won't say. If he listens to this, he'll be going, yep, that's me. But God's teaching him. And so and he's the one in college. So there's a little bit more involved there because that child is still needing our support in a lot of ways, because college doesn't provide for him to provide for himself.
Right.
So we have a little more, we sway in his life, or we could. I think my parents tried to control me in college. I think for us, we're just trying to encourage him in college. What do you think about how does a parent dealing with a kid in college? So we remind him of Jesus, give him to Jesus, remind him of Jesus. How do you influence that process? How have we dealt with it when they've said we want to make because I know, here what I'm getting at is you and I have expressed in all of our kids' cases, we have preferences on what we'd like to see them do.
Sure.
How many of them have done what we've thought that they should do?
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Just to be real clear, if our kids are listening, we're proud of you all. We're just going to deconstruct this for a second. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know that okay, the good thing is, like you referenced a while ago, we weren't lawyers, so we didn't push them to go to the big bad schools, you know, that have all the
good
big
schools.
Yeah, exactly.
Good bad schools.
The big known Ivy League or whatever. So therefore, because of that, our school even schooling them early was not pushing them to achieve high marks and all that, or high knowledge based, you know, whatever that could pass all these big tests and all that. That helped us, I think, because then we didn't have a clear mapped out that it has to be this way or that way. We did encourage them as they spoke things they were interested in. We have one who wanted to do all the big things, and she ended up not going to college at all because she got one rejection. So, and she said she wanted to be a doctor, then she wanted to be I don't know, she had all these big dreams.
Cycled through it.
But yeah. Well, and it makes me sad to some degree because that one rejection really did kind of kill her spark to try to go to college, which might have at least encouraged some of the bigger dreams she had, or, you know, sparked some longer lasting goals and stuff. But on the other hand, here we are. You just said, how do you influence? Well, you set the tone of your own home, how you want others, or, you know, your kids, to find the priorities and the things that are the highest of them. So what does she want to do? She wants to be a mom. And she's happy with that. And
we haven't been good. In those influences at times, because we too you and I have had more conversations about how we need to rein it in, our own opinions about things, and let them do what they want to do or make the mistakes that they need to make. Whether we can see a way to help them or not. Because even when we've sometimes told them what we think, they don't do what they're told.
Well, because the other angle is, from early on, and most parents know this, you wrestle with how much do you put them in lessons here or there? How much do you push them through those lessons?
How many soccer games do you drive to?
Exactly. And what sports? And do you push them to do a sport? Because most everybody gathers or gains some, you know, strength from learning how to be a team player, all that stuff. How much then, same thing, how much do you push them toward college? How much do you encourage them in their own dreams or push them toward something, you know, they're dreaming of but aren't willing to do the work? You know, those kinds are all wrestling matches. And I don't know that we even think we did good or bad in any of those areas. I don't think there's a formula for that. I think parents have to walk with Jesus. They have to lean on them. And with each one of our kids, when they would come bring these different things to us, even the crazy scenarios some of our kids have been through, we pray with them because we don't have the answers for them. We don't know, and we didn't have money just to hand them, go do this, go do this. We didn't have that, and that's okay, because I believe that made it even more clear that whatever they worked at had to either be God-given or God-inspired, or it wasn't going to be, completely the way they were thinking. We encouraged Micaiah in her musical dreams at one point or another, tried to help her get started in some of that, but it was still going to be up to her how much work she pours into it, who she rubs shoulders with, and even since she's been married, she's made some weird decisions and we've disagreed with them at times. But you cannot do anything for that child, really. You can only encourage them. And that's where, if parents try to do it for them, that's where it ends up a bad relationship. And again, that's where, to me, what I find most valuable, and I believe what my kids would even say, is that up in the heights of the priorities was the relationship. We wanted so badly for them to find Jesus, and then to trust that we were on their side, loving them behind here. And you've got kids nowadays who are going to be making all kinds of poor decisions and choices. And I think if you pray with them, even in some of the big, humongous ones that, praise the Lord, we didn't really have to deal with these days, if you pray with them, literally stop them. Mom, I'm dealing with this, or or Mom and Dad, I am this way, whatever. If you stop and pray with them, first of all, they'll either run away from that prayer because that's God convicting them, right, or in that prayer, they're going to find something they were looking for, which is that we know that God is the answer.
Well, humbling yourself before God is an incredibly useful tool. I will not. Not that I'm calling you a tool, Lord. I'm just saying that, yeah, it's a tool that God uses when you're before that which you fear, value, esteem higher than yourself, whatever term helps get your attention
if your
here.
family set it up as
and that's something that you understand, and your family sees by your own example that you understand something's greater than yourself is impacting. When you're young, it may be easier for you to block that out and think my parents are crazy or whatever. But the thing about what I started to say earlier is when you're young, it's great. You can go out there and do it. Life will beat the living daylights out of you in your younger years. That's why the Song of Solomon says it's good for a man to take his lumps while he's young. This is a very loosely paraphrased. Take his lumps while he's young, because he's able to adjust and come back, but not without that trust, without that reality that the Lord is there. So that's why I said we really, we're nearing the end of our time together. I'm thinking, remind them of Jesus. If as a parent you can remind them of Jesus, and then honestly, I think the best non-intrusive thing you can say to your child is, well, I have my feelings about that, but what do you think? Why are you asking this question? Why are we having this conversation?
Well, being honest with them.
If they come to you and say, Mom, Dad, I think I'm going to be a drug dealer, unless they're talking about going to pharmacology school, you may want to interfere there directly. But on most of those cases, and then sometimes you can't even, no matter what you do. Sometimes your child has to learn a hard lesson, which we've discovered with some friends this week and even in our own history. Yeah.
It's true, because you, like I said, you can only do so much. God's got to be their teacher. He's got to be the one who escorts them through learning that he's their teacher. Because those lessons are sometimes the hardest ones. But if you can be there for them while they're learning this, we've heard of a couple of families even recently who've had the whole gender dysphoria or just dysphoria, whatever, those kind of issues, and sexual deviancies and stuff.
There's no such
You've
thing
heard
as
them
deviancy
talk
in modern
about.
culture.
Okay, well, whatever. Beckett Cook is a good testimony to that, though. His mother and his sister-in-law, I think, is who he attributes to praying for him through the whole time. Not really accepting his lifestyle, but not rejecting who he was, loving him through it, but never accepting that this is who it's acceptable, but praying for him. That's a huge deal. It's a lot bigger than we give it credit for.
I have a question. Just pops into my brain here. How do you introduce a tough subject to a child that's no longer someone you can ground or send to their room or beat the sensitive? No, not that you beat your child. You know what I'm saying? How do you honor a child who's trying to be the adult you've trained them to be, but they clearly are coming or they're making some bad decisions and you're seeing it? How can you let them know your concerns? Here's a better way. How can you let a child know that you're concerned about the decisions that they're making while respecting where they're at? Because I'm sitting here thinking, just to be clear, we still have had knockdown, drag out fights with adult children.
Oh yeah, we have.
I mean, it's not, I'm glad to say it is not the dominant aspect of the family landscape.
Well,
but it has happened, especially with some of our boys.
Yeah.
Boys can be pretty aggressive.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the same one you're thinking of probably. Some of the difficulty, or good and bad. Some of the difficulty is you've got siblings to deal with. Some of the really great thing is if you raise these kids all the same and you've got a few siblings to deal with,
you got more fists.
They are, they're their
words.
peers. Yeah, and they actually do more of the accountability sometimes than you have to. So that's helped us a lot, I think. Mm-hmm. And so they can say things and take each other or fight against each other here or there, whatever, and you can kind of be the intermediate to that, as opposed to you trying to have to be the one that confronts, because most of the time, like you're saying, and I'm sure most parents with adulting or going towards children, it's difficult. You cannot confront them because they are not, it's somehow more condemning when it comes from a parent than it is if it's told from outside, or if it happens to be a sibling. Somehow the sibling can be speaking hard words, but they don't feel it's a whole family rejection. But if the parent says something, it feels like a whole family rejection or something. And they feel like they have to run away from that. So it is difficult. I would say one of the things, I love that, I don't know where we heard this recently, but hamburger criticism or something like that, where you start with the some sort of compliment or good thing, and then you put the negative part in the middle, and then that's what I'm talking about. And then you put the compliment on the back end. So somehow you make them feel really great about themselves, and in the middle of that was, and there's something else you need to think about,
Right.
I don't know though. I still even say
then
from
you set
parent,
them up to
that's
be
even more
constantly
difficult.
afraid when they're being complimented.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're really great at this. I can't believe you're getting this opportunity. Have you thought about this might be an obstacle or, difficulty?
And there's no guarantee that goes well.
But I'm sure you'll handle that correctly because you're mature and you're seeing where God's at work.
You got to be careful not to flatter. Sometimes, you're just going to be fine. You're fired. And we know you're going to do great because you're a smart cookie. We got to be careful about that. But you're right.
No, speak truth.
I was going to say, speak the truth in love. The idea of that is to be able to say, you have, if you're concerned about something for your child, somehow or another, you're going to have to find a way to bring that up. Now, my tendency is, and you've gotten on to me about this sometimes as my beloved wife and helpmate.
You want to make it humorous. Is that what you're
saying? No.
Oh, okay.
You think I'm never going to get to it.
Oh, okay.
You're always like, why haven't you brought this up? Oh. Why haven't you brought this up? You need to bring this up. It needs to be said something. Marshmallow. Yeah. Well, but no, that's different. I'm saying that because I interpret it as I'm not avoiding the conflict. I interpret it as I'm looking for the window where God will open a door for a graceful entrance. Just to bring it up out of my own fear and stress. I think those are the things, like we talked about earlier, set it up for a failure. So you have to be remind them of Jesus, right? We talked about that. And remember you've given them to Jesus, which means that when it's time for you to say something to them that you're concerned about, they belong to Christ, and you have to treat them the same way you would treat that respectably another human being who's not your child.
But that's why I'm saying you can build them up. I know you've walked with Jesus, or I've seen your life this way.
Yeah.
Have you considered this? And it may be something that will derail your faith, and be careful about that, or whatever. And then if you're putting it at the back end, but I know God is going to lead you if you'll seek Him in that. He's not going to let you be alone in that, or whatever. That's what I meant by couching that in a sandwich of of wisdom.
And what I'm saying is that
and kindness,
if you see that child, your child, also as an adult, and let them be an adult. My mom could never for the life of me not see me as a child. I mean, I was 50 some years old before and she still didn't see me as a child. She couldn't help it. I mean, and I don't mean that in the sense that, she was, wanting to ground me and send me to my room. It's like, you can't drive my car when you visit because you wrecked my car when you were in high school. I'm going, that's 35, 40 years ago. What are we talking about here? So, it's...
But it was even so much as to really doubt that you were making enough money to take care of your family and whatever.
After years and years and years of doing exactly that.
Exactly.
And so, and so us as a parent, the first thing you have to realize is when your child is out,
they're out.
They're out. And you need to treat them as an adult, and you would give advice to them the same as you would an adult. But you don't make decisions for your child. You've trained them, hopefully, to make good decisions. And if they're coming to you for wisdom, that's a good sign that you trained them well, because they know to seek an elder.
Right. And they know that you love them. It's not a judgment. It's a love couched thing. So if you're giving them advice because they want it or because they need it, as long as you have loved them well and loved them in truth, I don't mean catering to everything, and in some ways disciplining them correctly, then they feel loved and surrounded by love. You can say more things to them. Even if they react to it at first, they will usually come back. We've seen a couple of our children with that.
Absolutely.
So,
all right, we've been at this for a while, so we should probably wrap it up. Did we say everything we need to say? Do I need to talk more about this craziness? We can talk, well, we got a podcast. We can talk about this as long as we want to. Is there anything else? Closing thoughts? I got this. We're good. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for listening to this stuff, which I'll listen to later on to find out what we said, because I know we said a lot of good stuff. I don't know about you people, but so you need to understand when I'm asking you to listen to your podcast, even I listen to our podcast, and we do it. So we do that. I don't have to. I don't. I listen to it oftentimes as soon as it drops. It just like anyone else who subscribes.
God is so good to not let us hear half the things we say. That's what you're saying, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that's what's great about it, guys. And understand this if you're listening. When you listen to something, even something that has been said, you understand we believe as Christians that God speaks to the Holy Spirit through our lives. Sometimes we go back and we listen to our own podcast, and this is not to pat us on the back, but I'll often say, man, that woman I married is a smart cookie.
Say, thank you, God, for wisdom that we don't even... We cannot produce on our own.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that doesn't mean I'm not listening to my wife right now, because I am. It's just it sounds so much smarter the second time, and so hey, if you're doing that, please remember, listen to this podcast, share it with others. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and this has been a enjoyable segment. Tonya, thank you so much for joining me again as my wife, spouse, guest, and the mom part of Ask Mom and Dad. We'll see you next time. God bless. I keep on